Episode 101. The Boston Yankee Wasps petered out. I grew up when the so-called Boston elite was synonymous with the wealthy and powerful old Yankee families. Those Protestant families arrived in New England between 1634 and 1670. They had family names like the Lowells, the Peabodys, the Cabots, the Saltonstalls, the Quinceys, the Bowditches, the Emersons, the Winthrops, the Forbes, the Warrens, the Elliots, the Adamses, and of course the Lodges. The old homily goes, Boston, the home of the bean and the cod, where the Lowells talk only to the Cabots and the Cabots talk only to God. Those Boston Brahmins only married within those families, sort of like breeding horses, but without considering quality. They had a self-satisfying belief that Boston had produced nothing better, so they contentedly made a little clique of themselves and intermarried with the ridiculous assurance that because of such alliances they were the best. Even in 2025, first family status can still provide an inside track in obtaining certain executive positions in Boston. Those Wasp Yankee families today have succumbed to a phenomenon that I call dilution. The first few generations of those pioneers were overwhelmingly productive. They built Boston's buildings and factories, the banking system, the port, the roads, the government, and lots of family wealth. They were doers. But after generation upon generation of takers, that is, trust fund babies, who just exist to spend the originators' earned trust fund money, all the juice of the pioneers has been squeezed out. They have watered the soup. Plus, those Yankee families have almost birth controlled themselves out of existence. What is left is just a few wastrels. I am reminded of a conversation I had with one of those late-generation Yankees at the Sevens, a cool watering hole on Beacon Hill's Charles Street. I was about 18. I think his name was Frank Emerson. I had stopped for a beer and parked my Baldo Meat Products truck on the street. I was on my way to park the truck for the night after I finished my sales route. He was probably 42, always well-dressed and friendly. I knew him as a regular and sat next to him at the bar. We began talking about the Red Sox, but I was curious because he always seemed to be there. So I asked him what he did for a living. He said, I have a trust fund. I had never heard of that. So I quizzed him further. He said that he got an annual check of $200,000 from a family trust fund. I was dumbfounded, and I blurted out, how do I get one of those? He laughed and said, get some rich parents. However, Boston had another wave of arrivals starting in 1820 through 1880. The Irish Catholics made up the majority of those immigrants, particularly during the famine years of the 1840s and the 1850s, when they comprised more than 90% of the city's foreign-born residents. The Murphys and the Milans, my family, arrived with that coterie. Later, other immigrants, Germans, Italians, Poles, Jews, Lithuanians, Greeks, Canadians, and those from England and Scotland, came to Boston in smaller numbers. Many newcomers initially settled in the North End and Fort Hill near the present financial district, as older Yankees moved out. By 1860s, however, the Irish were fanning out to the South End and the West End and into nearby Charlestown, South Boston, Roxbury, East Boston, Cambridge, and Lynn. This dilution phenomenon shows up in other formerly productive ethnic groups, also like the Italian mob. The once powerful and wealthy mafia families, after many weakened generations, has been replaced by other ethnic criminal gangs like the Dominicans and the Asians. Today, another ethnic group is a mere shadow of its ancestors, the Boston Irish Catholics. Their former success in politics is history. Perhaps that Irish cohesion and pride disappeared when their enemies, the Wasps, also seemed to disappear. Just think of the Kennedy family. They still have money and property earned by their great-grandparents, but they are now useless blobs. Watering the soup applies to those Irish and Italian ethnic groups also. Perhaps that phenomenon is inevitable. I am so old now that I rub shoulders with all of those previous mentioned Boston folks. I knew mob figures through my college football card scheme. See my episode 18, Speaker O'Neill and My College Expulsion. Also, I had a real estate office in Roxbury and sold 3 deckers in cash as investments to the Brink robbery mobsters. Also, we Murphys grew up in the Boston milieu and in many ways were part of the Irish moment in Boston. My experience with the Yankees was almost always servile and antagonistic. I had a job for a short time as a laundry driver for Clearwater Laundry of Jamaica Plain. It was a door-to-door pickup and delivery service in Boston in the 50s and 60s. My territory was Boston's Back Bay and Beacon Hill. At that time, wealthy, prominent Yankee families lived there in large, fancy brownstones. My mostly women customers sent their suits, dresses, gowns, mink coats, and their husbands' tuxedos, etc., out for cleaning. I was treated as a less than human servant, and I hated it. I was also active as a young man in Republican politics, thereby butting heads with the watered-down Yankee moderates who had control of the party. I was a fire-breathing conservative and joined out with other like-minded Republicans trying to wrest control from the Yankees. My particular fervor was related to passing laws stopping abortions. I was like a flea in a Republican Beacon Hill mansion, but I was a flea who bit, and I put red welts on Yankee bottoms. I got to know and in my small way challenged Governor Frank Sargent, Governor Christian Herter, Leverett Saltonstall, and I was friendly with Boston City Councilor John Sears and others, all Republicans and all Brahmins. As I said, I am so damn old. I think I will write an ancient history book. This is Rod Murphy. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episodes. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and or refer a friend who might be interested in this old Boston podcast series. Again, my thanks.